I love the mantra. I've been to Creative Mornings before, but I guess I missed the mantra. It's a really beautiful way to start one of these. It's so wonderful to partner with Creative Mornings. We've partnered with them before, I think at it was a Christmas party as well, so it's always great. I'm not going to talk too much about women in communications and technology. I think there's a flyer on your seat, so that really says a little bit about what we do. But we're basically about advocating women in the new digital economy. So whether it's in comms and IT and making sure that we up the numbers of women in new digital economy roles from entry all the way to the C-suite. So that's what we're really about. I am delighted to intro Kristina Mausser, who I think I've known forever. We were just talking about, we're both kind of digital veterans when digital was online and web, and now it's digital. As you know, she's the president of Cannoli, and she's a senior content strategy consultant who seems to travel all over the world. Either you're in Poland or you're in New York City. So I can say that I've worked with Kristina many times, and she always brings a new perspective, a really fresh perspective and an innovative perspective to any project that we've worked upon. So I'm really looking forward to her talk. And but before, I would like to introduce Catherine Flynn, who is yoga instructor. Just doesn't seem enough, but anyhow, I've had the privilege of being in some of Catherine's classes, and she is a really wonderful practitioner, and I can say that in your classes you really, it's not just the body but the mind and the soul, you touch all three. So anyhow, looking forward to you leading us into a meditation this morning.
Oh, goodness. I'm used to more willing participants in meditation, I have to admit. When Creative Mornings asked me to do this, my one condition was that it not be optional. My experience is that when meditation is optional, no one takes up the option. And I wanted to set up those who were interested for success. So I teach locally, and then I happily get to teach around the world these days. And when I first started practicing yoga, I was a grad student, and then I actually went into marketing. So I was in digital and luxury marketing for American Express Canada and McDonald's Europe and Latin America. So I know often when people hear yogis espousing all the benefits of yoga and meditation, they think, well, you don't get my life, you don't get my pressures. And I really do. I remember what it's like to drink 10 cups of coffee and spend 12 hours a day at the office. The thing that's really important to remember with meditation and yoga is that you are not trained when you start. You're not mentally trained to find it easy. You are mentally trained to find it very, very challenging. The yoga that most people think of when they think of yoga, you think of yoga mats and you think of very bendy people taking postures. Those postures are actually the youngest portion of the yoga system. They're heavily influenced by British colonialism and Swedish gymnastics. And they are a very efficient system for processing stress hormones, right? So stress hormones don't actually diminish themselves in your body in and of their own accord. They only ever accumulate. So as a yoga teacher, I do not necessarily espouse that yoga postures are the way and we all need to do yoga postures together. My goal as a teacher is to, whether it's a person who makes space once in their month or once in their year or every single day, to send people out into the world in a way that helps them act with clarity and compassion. because that makes you a more effective human, that makes us more effective collectively, and that's personally my goal as a teacher. So when you start a meditation or a yoga practice, the simple act of sitting down and being still is very threatening to your brain. It's very threatening to your brain. The portion of your brain that is responsible for your immediate reactions is where most of us spend our time. Most of us spend our time in a very hyped up state of nervousness and stimulation. So people sit down and they think, you know, my friend who goes to Bali every year finds this so easy, no wonder she goes to Bali, but in my life this is not going to work. And so they scrap it before they really even give it a chance. So the truth is, your intuition when you sit down to meditate is poor. It's not giving you actual real feedback. Over time, what happens is the mind and the body, they get very good at what they do all the time, right? So if you stay in a hyped up state, you will get very good at staying in that place. And the list of things that happen are very sad, and I won't tell you. But over time, it gets easier. And energy gets diverted from the fight, flight, or fear center of the brain, or freeze, rather, portion of the brain, back to the portion of your brain that's responsible for what we could call executive function. It's also the portion of your brain that is responsible for a healthy sense of self and a healthy sense of empathy toward other people. The gray matter in your brain actually increases in size. The space between your neurons actually increases in size over time if you meditate. And so whether you are looking, companies always love meditation because they think that it'll chain you to your desk a little longer or your ideas will be that much better. And that's fine. You will be more creative in problem solving, in your work, in your family life, in your relationships if you meditate, but you will also be a kinder person. So I think it's a good reason. So I was asked if we needed cushions, and I figured most of you would be wearing, you know, zippers, which I haven't worn in a long time, but zippers and denim and stuff. So I said, no, the chairs are fine. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do a 5-minute sit, which for a beginning meditation mind is plenty. So find a comfortable static position. Stack your head over your ribs, over your pelvis. Try to elevate the spine. And then relax your shoulders. Feel zero pressure to be in a particular seat. Close your eyes, if it feels safe to do so. Take a very long inhalation through your nose. And then sigh that breath out your mouth. And then again, breathe in through your nose. Notice your ribs and your collarbone expand. And then let that breath go. Last time for now. Breathe in to the fullest. Keep your face relaxed. Let your breath go. Heel to sit upright. Go ahead and flutter open your eyes. When I ask my yoga teacher trainees how long they think their opening meditations are, numbers almost always range from 2 minutes to 30. Perception is very powerful. One of the things that I will leave you with is that one of my favorite meditation techniques is we borrow from Zen Buddhism. And what you do is you categorize the thoughts as they occur. So a thought arises and that's analysis, judgment, worry, escapism, whatever, storytelling. And then you go back to your breath. And I can't tell you how much you can learn about yourself. You can see where you're holding back. And really, if you do choose to pursue meditation or yoga, please do so with both compassion and discipline. It's the most rewarding aspects of the practice do require discipline, but they also require cutting yourself some slack and appreciating that change happens with small efforts over long periods of time. Thank you so much for having me.
Look blissed out. It's a good way to start a talk. So, I'm Chris. and I am going to be talking about this month's theme about valuing moments of pause, so around the theme of moments. So for those of you who don't know, as Nick mentioned earlier, I sort of consider myself a digital pioneer, and probably by virtue of the fact that I'm a Gen Xer. I coded my first computer at the age of 9, not the whole thing, just parts of it. I was on the internet by 1993, a long time before people were actually on the internet. I graduated from one of the first web design programs in Canada, and I've sort of ridden the wave of digital throughout kind of my career, and I've been very, very fortunate to do that. And my work now is in the field of user experience, and in particular in content. And so it takes me around the world, and I often talk about content strategy. And for those of you who don't know what that is, content strategy is basically the discipline of looking at your content and your people and your processes within an organization to be able to optimize the content you create across all digital channels. And so when I was given this theme of moments, I was trying to think of something a little broader than content strategy, so this is kind of outside of my comfort realm a little bit, but I wanted to also talk about creativity in general and how we need to value moments of pause in order to be better creatives. So if I talk about content, it's because of the context of what I do in terms of my work, but content to me is digital content, so that can include images, and words and video and audio, so I do think that that's going to encompass many of the people in this room. So this year we are celebrating a very important birthday. And yes, Canada's 150. Woo! But also we're celebrating the 10-year birthday of the iPhone. And that's kind of exciting for a digital geek like me. Because before the iPhone came along, we were sort of tethered to our desks or tethered to our laptops, and we created content on a web page, so it was relatively static. But when this wonderful man came out with the iPhone, it changed the context of content. So now everyone was a content creator, and it made content easy to produce, and it made people able to share content a lot quicker. And I was also, along with this first in my life, was really fortunate to be one of the first in Ottawa to have an iPhone. I went to Detroit, I bought an iPhone, I snuck it in across the border. I jailbroke it, put it on the Rogers Wi-Fi, and I had my iPhone, so it was lovely. So I have had an iPhone since 2007, before it even came to Canada. So this man brought us the iPhone, and it's wonderful, and but there's also been many interesting things that have come about with the iPhone. In 2007, when the iPhone launched, we also sort of had a confluence of social media. And while Facebook was around prior to 2007, we suddenly had ways to connect with each other through Facebook and Twitter that we didn't have before. Now, while I learned to code very early on, I have a degree in English literature, so I will always be a writer at heart. I love to write. And so we had this iPhone, and we had these different platforms. We had a blog, and we had, you know, this digital device. And I went to an early conference, and many of those conferences back then, for you who don't know, might have been, 15 people in the room trying to figure it out as we all went along. And someone said, we have this social media, and people are now connected to these devices, and how are we supposed to pump out content? Like, what do we do? And so a thought leader at the time came up with this sort of magic number, and he said, okay, well, you have to increase the frequency of posting, and you have to ensure that the timeliness of your posting is always consistent, because this sounds like, this is 50 years ago, I sound like a grandma, but we didn't have the ability to actually set up all of our publishing ahead of time. We actually had to physically post back then. And so as a writer, I thought, wow, that's like a lot of content. If I have to, and I think his magic number was 3 times a week, 3 times a day. I'm like, Okay, so I had a blog, and everything that we're experiencing has never been experienced before. And if you pick up a book, even from the Roman times, the human experience is really the same. There's a continuum there, and books will help to inspire the fact that you will get outside of the bubble that we've kind of created with the technology. It doesn't take much to, if you've ever done it, and I don't know why I have, but if you think about maybe your grandparents or your great-grandparents and you Google their name, you'll reach the end of the interwebs pretty quickly, unless they're on Ancestry.com. So there are thousands of really great, smart, creative people who existed long before us and use that to inspire your own creativity. Next, I think it's important to daydream. When we're children, we learn that daydreaming, stop daydreaming in class. But daydreaming is really important because it allows that space. In fact, there are 5 stages of creativity, and one of them is the incubator stage. And in the incubator stage, it's very important to actually decrease the cognitive load that you're thinking about of that topic. So you know how you maybe have had this happen where you're sitting at your desk and you're trying to be creative, whether it's problem solving or creating something, and it's just not coming, and then you get up and you go and you make a hot dog or something, and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I know what it is, and you solve the world's problems that way. That is this incubator. It's taking the cognitive load and putting it elsewhere so that you can actually have this space, this daydreaming space, to be able to create better. One of my farmer friends, she talks about talismans or tokens on her farm that give her moments of pause and reflection. And I really like that idea because I realize that when I'm traveling a lot and I'm very busy, I sometimes need just a moment to remind myself, oh my gosh, I need to take a moment of pause. So for me, that thing is trees. So even if I'm in New York and I see a tree, it gives me a moment to kind of take a breath and realize, oh yeah, there's a tree. And that actually gives me some creative insights in and of itself. And so even if it's just looking at steam on a coffee or something for you that reminds you to be present and reminds you that we need those moments of pause in our day, I think that's important. And I'm not going to negate technology because I love it, and I don't want you to think I don't. There are some amazing apps online and on your mobile phone. One of these, this is actually a Momentum app, and it's a Google Chrome extension, and it allows me to put in my focus for the day. So whenever I actually open a new browser window, this comes up and is a great way for me to just be mindful that I need to take a breath and maybe step away from the computer to have those moments of pause. Because the permission is incredibly important to give yourself if you want to maintain that creative life for your whole life. Because at the end of the day, the pause is as important as the note. And the next stage of my creative journey is not only just living in the country, but I've gone back to playing in a band, and I play in a concert band in my little community. And the age range of people is from 83 to 14. And it's fantastic because, again, in my world, I hang out with a lot of digital types, and it's great to have all these different generations coming together to be creative together and taking pause in their day. And I find that really fills me up. And the pause really is as important as the note. And this isn't, do this or you're going to get sick or something. That's not it. It really is to give yourself permission to not think that you're going to create the best app all the time. And that, for me, when I want to blog now, it's when I have something really important to say. And that's when I say it. I don't try to adhere to a schedule. I just try to put something out there on the web that is insightful, that's smart, and maybe not will it achieve immortality, but will hopefully slow people down long enough to cause them to have a chain reaction of creativity in their world. So.
Yeah, so we can take a couple of questions if anybody has any they want to shoot to Chris. We don't have much time, so one or two. There's got to be one out there. Come on, full room. All right, I'll ask you one. So a good question I always like to ask is, what do you do to fuel your creative process when you hit a block? I know you kind of touched on it already a little bit, but if you want to recap that.
So when I hit a block, I usually go for a walk.
That's good. Yeah.
That's pretty much, coming back to Steve Jobs, he actually loved the walk and talk meeting because it helped to, come up with ideas. And I think going for a walk is one of the best ways to, or I'll play my flute, actually. It's interesting because I actually feel sometimes the shift in the thought process, just because looking at notes and everything I do is words is a definite shift. So
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Okay.
We don't have a mic, so you might have to stand. Well, you only have this one.
Go ahead.
Should I stand up?
Yeah,
Sure.
Please.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so much. Really wonderful talk there. My name is Scheherazade Van Arl. I'm actually with a group called a Mindful Leader out of U of T. And part of what we do is look at building, supporting leaders to bring more of what you spoke about into the workplace. And I'm wondering if you have any reflections on how this could be more ingrained into workplace culture. Thank you.
I don't normally speak about this within workplace culture. I am, though, recommending a book that I read about 6 months ago. It's an older book, but it's by Arianna Huffington called Thrive. And it is, if you haven't read it, it's the most important business book I think I've ever read, and I read a lot of business books. So I think that more corporate cultures have to be cognizant of this, and it is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about content strategy, because I look at workflow and people and process and governance so that people don't have to work as hard, because one of the things with content production that organizations haven't realized is that it requires work and resources, two things that they often don't give people enough of. And so they have plenty of demands on their content requirements, whether it's external or internal facing content, but they won't allocate resources in terms of people. So sometimes it's one person doing all of this stuff. And I think that that's why, for me, content strategy fills that gap, because it sheds light on that. Yeah. And there was a question back there?
Sorry. It was kind of similar. I'm a content strategist at an agency, and it was sometimes you're on really tight deadlines to come up with really creative content for a variety of uses. And I guess I was wondering if you had any tips or tricks for when you do have that block and you're on a tight deadline. How do you, besides a walk, is there anything are there things you read, or are there resources you go to get going?
Yeah, I don't really have anything that would be different probably than what you do, but one of the things that I always emphasize to clients is the idea of create once, publish everywhere, right? Or create once, publish as appropriate. And if you are creating once, then you're able to work smarter, I think, with your content, so that all of those content chunks can be distributed as required across channels as needed. That doesn't solve your deadline issue, but that's one of the things I always tell clients for sure.
That's great. Thank you.